Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 8th of January 2025. From the news section. Edinburgh Airport increase pick-up and drop-off charge for passengers. This article has been written by Mark McDougall and it's being read by me, Corey. People picking up or dropping off passengers at Edinburgh Airport will now be charged a minimum of £6. The airport, now part of the Vinci Airports network, has decided to increase the cost by £1 to encourage more use of public transport. It means that from next Monday, January 13th, the cost to use the pick-up and drop-off area will start at £6 for the first 10 minutes at the airport and then continue to increase for any time spent over that. It is hoped it will increase the number of passengers who travel to the airport via public transport and reduce emissions caused by transport to and from the area. Local residents and users of electric cars will still qualify for a 50% discount on the first 10 minutes. Gail Taylor, Chief Commercial Officer, ex-Aero, at Edinburgh Airport, said, "We have just had a record year for passengers at Edinburgh Airport, and that number is likely to grow year on year, and we want to make sure that people are making more suitable choices when getting to and from the airport. The use of cars is the most polluting mode, with 4 journeys for each passenger compared to just 2 when using public transport. We want more people to use the robust transport links we have, as this both reduces emissions and congestion. We have a number of large capacity projects planned over the next few years, and reinvestment back into the airport infrastructure will improve the overall experience for passengers." That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Mark McDougall, and it was read by me, Corey.
For the Herald, Wednesday the 8th of January 2025. Sports section. My family started filming at the corner I scored from. Proper. This article is by Matt Walker and it's read by Ross. Rangers defender Robin Proper revealed his family knew he would score in the Old Firm clash and even filmed the exact moment he netted his first goal for the club. The Dutch defender grabbed the crucial second goal in the win against Celtic earlier this month, his first for Rangers. Proper had some of his family at the game, and he reckons they already knew what was going to happen. He explained, "My father and my brother had already said in advance that I was going to score, and they actually started filming at the corner from where I scored from. My first goal for Rangers. Of course, it was a lucky coincidence. The plan was that I would fight out the battles at the far post during the corners, but the ball just happened to fall at my feet. It was all wonderful, the atmosphere, the victory, even scoring. The sound was insane, especially after every goal. You shut yourself off from it. You have to. It was only after the 3-0 that I could look around me for the first time and consciously experience everything. That it was so cool. During the match, I tried to coach the boys. It was mainly pointing and hoping that you were heard. I did that at 20 Eschenhad in their De Golschverd Stadium too. That's where the supporters are also very noisy. But here at Ibrox, there are 20,000 more in the stadium. You can tell the difference. When you come out at the tunnel, the sound immediately hits you in the ears. That article was read by Ross and was by Mark Walker.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 9th of January 2025, from the sports section, Andy Murray says Novak Djokovic coaching role was unexpected, by PA News Agency. Andy Murray admitted he was completely against the idea of going straight into coaching before Novak Djokovic tempted him back on tour. The Scots' partnership with his former rival is the talk of Melbourne Park, and there was again plenty of discussion between the pair at a practice session on Thursday. Afterwards, Murray talked about his new role, which took the whole sporting world by surprise when Djokovic announced it in November with a small group of reporters. The 37-year-old did also not see it coming, saying, "I was actually playing golf. We'd actually been exchanging messages. Novak had messaged me just wanting to chat. I was on the 17th hole of the golf course and a guy I was playing with said to me, 'Do you know what's next?' And I was like, 'No, not really.' He said, 'Do you have any plans or to do any coaching?' And I said, 'Honestly, I can't think of anything worse to do right now.' And then 30 minutes later I was in the car and I called Novak, and then we had a conversation and he asked if I would be interested in helping, which I obviously wasn't expecting. I said to him, 'Look, I need to think about it and talk to my family.' So I spoke to them, and after a couple of days I thought it was a pretty unique opportunity and experience. Murray has spent a lot of time on the golf course since his retirement following the Olympics last summer, while he also spoke about the desire to spend more time with his young family. He was unable to join Djokovic at the warm-up tournament in Brisbane last week because of a family skiing holiday, but Murray insisted going back on the road had not caused marital tensions. "My wife was very supportive of it," he said. "I was actually going to be in Australia anyway for a few days during the tournament. She was surprised, obviously, that he'd asked me, but she was really supportive of it. Maybe if it was a younger player, where it was maybe long term, you might be looking at 5-6 years potentially. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case with Novak, but you never know if he's doing well. But she was very supportive." Murray spent a week and a half with Djokovic in Spain during pre-season, but for now the arrangement only extends until the end of the Australian Open, which the Serbian will be bidding to win for an 11th time. Murray has not ruled out a more permanent deal going forward, adding, "I thought it would be a good idea to try it together and spend some time in the off-season through Australia and see how it goes for both of us, because it's a little bit different. It's not the usual kind of setup. So it made sense to trial it and see if it works. And then we said we'd make a more definitive decision after the tournament." Murray's first match in the coaching box will come when Djokovic takes on young American Nishesh Basavaredi in the first round. And that report was written by the PA News Agency and read by me, Ian McKenna. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 9th of January 2025, from the sports section, Celtic 2, Dundee United 0. Instant reaction to the burning issues. An article first published on Wednesday the 8th of January and written by Graham McGarry. Celtic moved 16 points clear at the top of the Premiership with a workmanlike victory over Dundee United on an evening where the most interesting action arguably took place in the stands rather than on the pitch. All eyes and ears were on the home crowd at a freezing Celtic Park to see how they would respond to manager Brendan Rodgers' weekend comments, but they reacted largely with humour, and yes, even a little patience, as they stayed with their team during a sticky second half spell. Daizen Maeda opened the scoring in the first half that Celtic completely dominated, but United put up more of a fight after the break, and it took until the 83rd minute for the host to put the game to bed through Rio Hatate's composed finish. Here are the talking points from Celtic Park. Maeda makes up for Nicholas Kuhn-Blow. There may have been some concern from the Celtic support when the teams emerged, and they noticed that the red-hot Kuhn had been replaced in the starting 11 by Yang Hyung-jun in a late change to the named side. No disrespect to the South Korean, but he has yet to really find his feet in a Celtic jersey, and hasn't shown anything close to the level that Kuhn has produced consistently this season. His pace and trickery would surely be missed against another side who were coming to Glasgow to frustrate. They needn't have worried, because on the other wing they had another man who has consistently stepped up to the plate this term, and Maeda was at it again as he pounced on a loose ball in the area to break the deadlock. The Japanese was clearly irked at Kuhn's double against St Mirren, pulling him away slightly in their own personal battle, moving back to within one of his teammate with his 15th goal of the season here. It is a remarkable return from the Celtic Wing Kings at this stage of the campaign, and an integral reason behind their success. Green Brigade make their point. The ultras in Celtic's Park's North Curve were always going to have a little bite back at manager Brendan Rodgers after he accused them of being disrespectful to Greg Taylor by singing about Kieran Tierney during the win over St Mirren. Rather than direct their barbs at their manager though, they responded by dusting off old ditties about the likes of Henrik Larsson, Jota, Tommy Burns, Charlie McGrew, Odsonne Edouard and Artur Boric, presumably to make the point that revering former players doesn't mean they're disparaging the current crop, though that rather ignores the fact that a return for Tierney is perhaps more realistic than seeing their King of Kings back in the hoops. That being said, he probably could have played here in the opening 45 and not looked out of place against a rotated United side who camped in and just tried to limit the early damage. As for the rest of the crowd, it was hard for them to give their team too warm a reception when they were freezing their nether regions off, but they made a point of giving Taylor a decent cheer when the teams were read out prior to kick-off. They were also more of a reverential silence than any groaning as they watched their favourites patiently trying to unlock the massed ranks of what I'm reliably informed were electric purple jerseys strung along the edge of the United area. Even in the second half, as United sensed they had a sniff of getting an equaliser, they stuck with their team, which is sure to have been Rodgers' aim in making the comments in the first place. As for Taylor himself, he dealt with the furore surrounding him this week in his customary understated style, turning in the sort of quietly accomplished performance that is his trademark, and that is perhaps taken for granted by some. There was a school of thought that with his current contract expiring in the summer, and speculation mounting over his future, that his manager hadn't done him any favours by increasing the spotlight on him with his comments at the weekend, but if it had added any pressure to his shoulders, you wouldn't have known it. He was unflustered, and turned in a 6 or 7 out of 10 with the minimal of fuss, rather fitting really, and in keeping with his Celtic career. United's priorities lie elsewhere. It was rather depressing at the interval to reflect upon the fact that the team sitting in third place in the table had rested some of their big hitters like the league's top scorer, Sam Dalby, for a visit to the league leaders. It seemed to signal that manager Jim Goodwin saw this game as something of a write-off, while, probably correctly, viewing Saturday's game against St Mirren as a bigger fixture for his side. Their ultra-defensive approach in the first half was also understandable, but this United team have shown themselves this season to be better than mere cannon fodder. Mercifully, as the second half got underway, United advanced, and even caused 1 or 2 moments of anxiety in the stadium. Alas, they couldn't snatch anything from the game, but Goodwin will be satisfied to march on to Paisley with minimal damage done to the goal difference, and with some of his main men still fresh in the legs. With Hatate of late, it seems to be all sugar or all well, you know what. Here, thankfully, it was the former, as he climbed off the bench to plant a fine shot side foot finish high past Sam Walton to finally kill off the visitors. If he could show a greater level of consistency than he would be one of the first names in the team sheet, then again, with the quality he undoubtedly possesses, it would also probably not be in Scotland. And that report was by Graham McGarry.
From the Herald, Monday, 13th January 2025. Sports section. Callum McGregor and why Celtic's defeat the Rangers was a good one. By Matthew Lindsay, chief football writer. Callum McGregor has described Celtic's agonising defeat to Rangers earlier this month as a good one, because it drove home to the Scottish champions how painful losing can be and provoked a positive reaction. McGregor was devastated when Brendan Rodgers' side slumped to an excruciating 3-0 reverse to Philip Clement's team in a William Hill Premiership match at Ibrox a fortnight ago. It was the first competitive league match the Glasgow Giants had lost to their city rivals in nearly 3.5 years, and the first domestic fixture they had failed to draw a triumph in since Hearts beat them 2-0 at Tynecastle in March. However, the Parkhead club's captain has been pleased with the response to the result. Celtic have recorded consecutive wins over St Mirren, Dundee United and Ross County since, and increased their advantage at the top of the table. McGregor, who is set to return to action in a Premiership match against Dundee at Dens Park tomorrow evening, is confident that no complacency will creep into his side's play in the coming weeks, despite their comfortable lead. The reaction's been superb in the 3 games since, he said. There's been a lot of goals, the team's playing well. There's a nice consistency and fluidity in the team again. Obviously, it was a sore one for us, but we had to dust ourselves down. We had a game really quickly after that. The boys have spoken about the demands that we want to put on each other, and the last 3 games have been excellent. So it's been a really good response. Now we'll keep doing that every time we play. Every time we train, it means so much to us. We'll give our very best every time we get the chance. McGregor added, of course it can be difficult, but probably the Rangers one was actually a good one. Just to reinforce the group and make you realise that when you lose a game, it hurts you. It doesn't matter how far ahead you are, how well you've done previously. When you lose a game of football, it hurts. That's what's good about this group. They understand it and they know what the expectation level is. So it doesn't really matter how in front we are or whatever. We want to know and win every single game. Try and give the maximum level that we can and then just see where we can get to at the end of the season. We want to continue strong and keep pushing. It's the same every year. It's how you react. Once you've had a bad setback, then get back on the horse again. Go again. Do everything you can to make sure the next one's a positive experience. The boys have been fantastic, driven by a lot of good players. We know what the level is. We dropped below that for Rangers. So it's up to us to show that reaction and get back on the horse and keep winning football matches. That article was by Matthew Lindsay. From the Herald, Monday 13th of January 2025, Sports Section. Jacob Fearnley beats Nick Kyrgios as Scot stuns on Australian Open debut, by Ewan Payton, sports writer. Scotland's Jacob Fearnley claimed the biggest win of his career at the Australian Open with a straight sets victory over Nick Kyrgios. Home favourite Kyrgios, the 2022 Wimbledon finalist, was handicapped by an abdominal strain as Fearnley, aged 23, prevailed 7-6, 6-3, 7-6 in 2 hours and 19 minutes on his debut in Melbourne. Kyrgios was playing his first Grand Slam event since the 2022 US Open after recovering from chronic wrist and hip injuries. I was extremely nervous before the match and I didn't get too much sleep, Fearnley said in his on-court interview. I knew it was going to be a rowdy match. I thought I played good. I'm sorry for Nick. I knew he was dealing with some stuff, but he played some unbelievable tennis and I thought it was a great match. I just tried to focus on myself as best I could. All things considered, it's probably the best match I've ever played. I've had a few heckles thrown my way in American college tennis, but this was something I'd never experienced before. Fearnley had admitted to feeling anxious about playing Kyrgios on Australian soil, acknowledging that the partisan Melbourne crowd would be against him. The world number 92 was seeking to take another huge step in his second Grand Slam. The 23-year-old lost to Novak Djokovic in the second round at Wimbledon last year, following a spectacular rise through the rankings. Kyrgios served 2 break points at 3-all in the first set, but a couple of grimaces revealed his inner turmoil, and the Australian began suggesting he should not be playing through the pain barrier. Fearnley was unruffled as Kyrgios' complaints grew louder and the language directed at his team courtside became more colourful. The British number 3 dominated the tiebreak with a series of explosive forehand winners, and it was the same script in the second half. The Scot broke early and Kyrgios' discomfort was clear as he twice called for medical assistance during game breaks. Kyrgios told his team at the end of the second set that he would keep going until I can't anymore. The end looked nigh when Kyrgios missed a routine volley at the net and firmly broke for a 2-1 lead in the third set. But Kyrgios broke back for 3-all before an underarm serve and a spot of showboating got the John Kern Arena crowd on its feet. Amid seesaw drama, Fernley had break points in successive games with Kyrgios, despite requiring more medical attention, had a set point when 5-4 ahead. None were taken before Fernley finally broke Kyrgios' resistance in a one-sided tiebreak. That article was by Ewan Payton. From the Herald, Monday, 13th of January 2025. Sports section. Under fire, Philippe Clement gets backing from Rangers squad. By Graham McGarry, senior sports writer. A manager receiving public backing from his board isn't always a welcome thing. In fact, it is often a portent of doom for an under-pressure coach. Whether that is the case when it comes to Philippe Clement, time will tell. The Belgian received the dreaded vote of confidence from new Rangers CEO Patrick Stewart on Saturday, though as things go, his words were rather on the equivocal side. Clement's call for unity after the win over St Johnstone on Sunday at a fractious Ibrox seemed as far-fetched as the prospect of him standing in the Ibrox dugout come the first day of next season. But at least there's solid backing for the manager from within the dressing room. As the Rangers support know all too well, though words are one thing, while action is quite another. Still, while players are highly unlikely to slate their manager when asked if they're behind him during difficult times, they can often skirt around the issue or offer mealy-mouthed platitudes. When it fell to Mohamed Diamande to answer it, the Rangers midfielder response was emphatic and offered without hesitation. He is all of us together, Diamande said. He brought me in and I trust him, and I'm sure other players do too. They trust his tactics and what he wants to bring to the club, and we just need to deliver what he shows us in training. And you need to deliver it in the pitch for him and also to get the maximum points. We all want to achieve our goals. While Clement is unlikely to be completely reassured by Stewart's backing, Diamande did say that the CEO's gesture did have a settling effect on the squad. It's good, he said. We are all trying to do our best and we're all learning from each other. We listen to him and we try to improve things together as a team. I've known him before I came to Rangers and he brought me in and I try to learn from him each day. I'm just trying to be the best I can be and to learn from him or his assistant, but also my teammates. If questions on the manager delivered a direct response from Diamande, his handling of queries on how the unrest in the Ibrox stands and the walkout by the Union Bears and the Rangers Supporters Association affected the men in blue were danced around as nimbly as the St Johnstone midfield. I didn't really notice anything because I was focused, he said. I didn't really see what was going on around, but I could hear a lot of noise and the noise was like the support they'd been giving. So I felt they were supporting us and I didn't really know what was going on. I just played my game and also with my teammates to help them. I mean, we just want to win games and winning the game is going to make them happy because that's what the club is about. And I think they've been backing us up. And like I said, I felt they did on Sunday also. Whether Diamande has noticed it or not, that support seemed to slip into an apathetic indifference for many on Sunday amid the sporadic outbursts of protest. Perhaps more worryingly, though, it seemed to spill into anger among the away support at Dens Park last Thursday night, who have had their fill of the dreadful results their team have posted when not playing at Ibrox this season. To have won just 3 of their 11 league matches on the road is a damning statistic, and Diamande says that finding a solution to their away day woes is the number one priority every day at their Akenhoy training base. It's been difficult away, he said. We've not been good at getting the points we wanted, but we're really working hard in training to try and find out why we can't win games away. And I think we're getting there slowly to get the points we all want. We need to be able to break teams down, and when they sit down with 11 players behind us, we're really working on that. If they're going to improve in their travels, then they need more from the likes of Diamande, who showed with his goal against St Johnstone that he does possess a willingness to get into the danger area and a nose for sniffing out an opportunity. I really want to keep on doing that, he said. I want to make the difference. Also, when I get up higher on the pitch and I want to score the goals, give the assists, and I think that's something I'm working on at training, and I hope it continues. I've had good games this season and also not so good ones, but I'm happy that I was back on the score sheet and I want to continue doing that, just as I said. I always want to be on the ball. I want to bring the team up, and I also want to get into the box and score goals. That article was by Graham McGarry. From the Herald, Monday, 13th of January 2025, Sports section. Box office Rocky Bashiri and the goal that changed the season, by Craig Fowler, columnist. Football's greatest strength lies in its unpredictability. Yet so often when supporters discuss the merits of individual teams or players, we speak in finalities. This player is the best in the league. That player is absolutely useless. This manager is a genius. That manager has lost the dressing room, etc., etc. It's a paradox at the heart of the game, and one which is entirely necessary, because if you believed the unexpected all the time, then eventually it would stop being special. Obviously, patterns in football exist all around us and can help us to predict the immediate future. Teams will go on lengthy winning and losing streaks where the next result seems preordained. Players will impress consistently for long periods where everything they touch seems to turn to gold, or they will struggle to the point where a catastrophic mistake is almost a guarantee. We all know this, and yet we're always surprised when the script suddenly flips. When the striker in the form of their life misses a sitter in a crucial game, or when someone who was previously thought of as being past the point of no return turns it all around. Rocky Bashiri is one such player in the 2024-25 Scottish football season, but the Hibernian centre-back has done more than simply furrow a different path for his own personal narrative. He's arguably done more than any one individual to turn a significant chunk of the Scottish Premiership on its head. The November 26th encounter between Hibs and Aberdeen at Easter Road had one of the barmiest finishes to a football match you've ever seen, likely to see as 3 goals were shared in stoppage time for an unforgettable 3-3 draw. But it also has had a huge impact on the fortunes of the two clubs involved. When Esther Sockler cancelled out Nicky Cadden's injury time equaliser, it looked certain that Hibs boss David Gray was going to get the sack. He had recently been given the dreaded vote of confidence, had lost 4-1 to Dundee just a few days prior, and would have been left a point adrift at the bottom of the table. But Bashiri put his body on the line to force home the most unlikely of equalisers, demonstrating the team's willingness to fight for their manager and for each other. Since then, Hibs have only lost 1 to Celtic, winning 6 of 9 games and propelling themselves into the top 6. Unthinkably, they're now also in the race for 3rd place and the potential bounty of a prolonged European adventure next season. That's because while Bashiri's goal inspired Hibs to turn their season around, it also heralded a perplexing slump from the Dons. Having matched Celtic stride for stride to the top, they just lost for the first time the previous game, gone down 2-1 to St Mirren in Paisley. But when Sockler netted his stunning goal at Easter Road, it appears as if the match would be little more than a blip, from which they dusted themselves down and continued on with their fairy tale campaign. Instead, it ended up being the second game in a winless run, which now stretches to 11 without victory. The battle for 3rd once seemed preordained. If Aberdeen didn't go one further and split the old firm, now they're trailing newly promoted Dundee United by 2 points. Hibs meanwhile lurk just 6 points away, whereas if it wasn't for Bashiri's equaliser, they would have been 26 points adrift of Aberdeen less than 2 months ago. As for Bashiri, the hero of the tale, it all seems just so unbelievable. And yet, we shouldn't be programmed to expect the unexpected when it comes to the Congolese international. This is a man who signed to his club by accident. In fact, the administrative error which saw Hibs contractually obliged to make his move from Norwich City permanent in 2022 wasn't the only one which would happen that summer, as a failure to realise Bashiri was suspended for their final league group stage game finalised an embarrassing early exit from the tournament. Having failed to impress during his initial loan spell, it didn't bode well for his future prospects. But Bashiri managed to make himself a first-choice pick under Lee Johnson before an injury in January pretty much ended his 22-23 campaign. He was considered a starter the following term before erratic play on an underperforming Hibs side ultimately saw him split time with a notably over-the-hill Paul Hanlon. It looked certain his spell in green and white would soon be over earlier this season, when Gray signed not one, but two, but three new centre-backs in the summer window. Bashiri was so far down the pecking order that he played just once in the league as an 83rd minute substitute, prior to November despite being fit and also available. But lacklustre play from those centre-backs, an injury to Marvin Ekpitia, a change in formation and that aforementioned goal against Aberdeen have all combined to transform his prospects. He's in great form, and now there's even talks of a potential contract extension. There's a wave of goodwill coming down from the stands as supporters are becoming adjusted to Bashiri's box office manner of playing centre-back. Within the confines of 90 minutes, you don't know what's going to come next. And amongst otherwise strong recent performances against Hearts and Rangers, he still scored a clumsy own goal in the former and nearly cost his side a late-earned point with some absent-minded dithering in the latter. Even in Saturday's fairly routine 3-1 win over Motherwell, Bashiri was on his best behaviour defensively, but still ventured on a lung-busting run through the middle of the opposition defence, which preceded Jack Field's red card challenge on Martin Boyle. How many centre-halves would ever think of that? It's doubtful whether fans would be so forgiving if such eccentricity was repeated in the midst of a European run during the business end of the season. But thanks in no small part to Bashiri, Hibs look like they're going to be in a position to find out. That article was by Craig Fowler.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 13th of January 2025, from the Voices section. James Watt is spouting nonsense about work-life balance. Article written by Ros Foyer, STUC General Secretary. What else is there left to say about James Watt? The notorious punk IPA former Brewdog Supremo hit the headlines again last week as he seeks to rebrand himself, post-Brewdog, into some sort of content creationist, business lifestyle influencer. In fairness, it's worked. I'm about to write 1,000 words on why his latest viral nonsense is exactly that. Alongside his fiancée Georgia Toffolo, whom he previously announced he was considering delaying his marriage to for reasons of tax efficiency, he claimed that there is no need for a work-life balance, and those who want one clearly hate their jobs. Now, to answer my own question, there's a lot I could say about James Watt. Whether it's being accused of allowing members of the fascist English Defence League to down pints of punk in his flagship London pub without warning staff, whether it was his humbling apology to staff over the toxic work environment at Brewdog, whether it was 100 former staff members who bravely shared their experience of sexism and misogyny within the industry, whether it was Brewdog's complete stonewalling and busting of their staff who tried to organise into a union through Unite Hospitality, or whether it was their decision to abandon paying their staff the real living wage, there's a long, inglorious and damning plethora of things I could say about Watt during his time at Brewdog. Now, having said all that, I will attempt to play the ball and not the man. His comments, demonising those that want to have balance and a life outside of work, should be deconstructed and dismissed in the same way he dismissed the importance of union representation. We have to rally against this glorification in all work and no play. There is nothing punk about working far beyond contracted hours, risking burnout, fatigue, ill health, and much more besides. There is nothing admirable in workers putting their own safety on the line to appease the whims of employers or to try as best they can to cope with the demands of the job. Last week, new figures published in 1919 magazine showed that the number of working days lost to mental ill health among Police Scotland officers has soared by more than 50% over the last 5 years. That equates to 440,630 days lost due to our frontline staff, public servants no less, struggling with depression, anxiety and stress resultant from working demands. In 2021, 31% of staff in NHS Scotland who were off work were absent due to stress, anxiety or depression. The NHS Scotland workforce statistics for 31st of March 2023 show Scotland having an absence rate of 6.2%, the highest level seen in the past 10 years. Is this really the worker utopia Watt dreams of? That in order to gain self-worth, in order to get approval from the business bros and to deem yourself successful, you must run yourself into the ground? Statistics on the intensity of work in the UK are easy to come by. We work on average 2 hours more per week than is typical in Europe. Almost half of British employees work outside of their contracted hours for over an hour every day. This overwork is most prevalent amongst 18 to 24-year-olds, a large proportion of whom work in the hospitality sector. It's wrong and frankly insulting for a multi-millionaire who, self-admittedly, is taking a career break to enjoy some travel, friends and family time, to infer those who don't work themselves to the bone clearly don't care about their jobs. Our nurses, police officers, council workers, social care providers and others throughout our public sector are the backbone of our economy. They drive investment into our economy. They're the ones who work all hours of the day and night across different shifts and different demands for nowhere near enough money. People work within our public services not for riches nor glory, but primarily through a sense of vocation and public duty. Watt is entitled to believe there is nothing more rewarding than taking your work home with you, that there is nothing more exhilarating than hearing the ping of another email arriving at 11 p.m. or WhatsApp for business notifications going like the clappers at all hours of the night. He can fill his boots. But it's not something we should be preaching to our children. It's not something we should normalise. Yes, work hard. Yes, do your best. But that's not measured in the hours logged nor the flight miles travelled. There must be a wholesale transformational change in our economy and in our thinking. It's economically illiterate as well as dangerous to think that the best way to drive growth is through a depleted and exhausted workforce. Empowering workers to take ownership of their working lives through flexible, coordinated working that suits them, not the employer, is how we boost our economy. That means hours you can rely on, security over conditions, and balancing demands at home, as well as in the workplace, gives workers the rights that they require, which, in turn, boosts productivity and well-being at work. As I write this, the Deputy Prime Minister is in Scotland, meeting with businesses and workers to discuss Labour's Make Work Pay plan. It's the campaigning plan for the New Deal for Working People, the welcome, if slightly watered down, manifesto promise from the new UK Labour government to revolutionise workers' rights. The New Deal was hard fought and hard won. Within it, unions sought assurances over workers' ability to organise within the workplace and to secure working rights that give flexibility to us, not the bosses. The Deputy Prime Minister is visiting, amongst other places, McAllister Litho. Their Managing Director, Jeanette McAllister, said, "Flexibility has always been part of our ethos. Our team has the freedom to structure their shifts within our factory's operational hours, ensuring a balance that works for them while meeting business needs. As Managing Director, I'm proud of the trust and collaboration this creates. It's what makes us a successful and people-focused business." Flexible working and having a work-life balance, therefore, suits workers, suits business, and suits the suits. Watt would do well to remember that as he begins his leisure time out with the workplace. Ros Foyer is General Secretary of the STUC, and the article was read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 13th of January 2025, from the Voices section. Here's one reason to start 2025 with a sense of optimism. Article written by Graham Roy, Professor of Economics. Last summer, I wrote about the renewed optimism surrounding the global economy. Inflation in most leading economies appeared to be heading back towards target levels. Interest rates were stabilising at more neutral levels, and the growth outlook was the most promising it had been in several years. From a historical perspective, this return to trend, or what economists call a steady state, might not seem extraordinary. Growth remained subdued compared to long-run averages, and living standards continue to feel the impact of the recent inflationary spike. However, compared to the turbulence of recent years, even a semblance of normality would be welcome. Over the last 15 years, the global economy has been hit by a series of once-in-a-generation shocks, from the 2008 financial crisis to the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent energy price surge. By mid-2024, the Scottish economy was only around 2.5% larger than pre-pandemic. In other words, nearly 5 years of growth barely equalled what we might typically expect from one good year. A return to stability wouldn't just be a relief in itself. It would also create space for businesses to focus on boosting investment, which has been exceptionally weak in recent years, and for policymakers to implement the reforms necessary to address the chronic productivity challenges facing the economy. Stability would also allow for meaningful discussions on how to tackle key structural transformations in our economy and public services, such as the transition to net zero, the integration of artificial intelligence, and the implications of an ageing population. But that was 6 months ago. As we enter 2025, the outlook has once again turned uncertain, with significant risks looming on the horizon. Many sectors of the economy are still grappling with the fallout from Brexit, including higher costs, staff shortages, and diminished access to key markets. Ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine continue to threaten energy prices and disrupt supply chains. Next week, Donald Trump will be sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. If his administration follows through on its rhetoric of resurrecting 18th century trade protectionism under the banner of making America wealthy again, the global economy could face serious repercussions. Key Scottish sectors, such as Scotch whisky, may find themselves in the crosshairs of retaliatory tariffs. More broadly, a potential trade war sparked by increased tariffs could fuel another wave of global inflation, forcing central banks to hike interest rates yet again. These international challenges come on the heels of lacklustre UK growth data. The latest figures show the UK economy stagnating between July and September, with a slight contraction recorded in October. Indeed, in recent days, talk of stagflation has spooked bond markets. The UK government's borrowing costs are now at their highest level since 2008. Despite these headwinds, our latest forecasts at the Scottish Fiscal Commission for the year ahead remain cautiously optimistic. We project growth of 1.6% in 2025 to 26. Not startling, but an improvement on last year. More generally, the immediate next few years represent a critical window for Scotland to establish itself as a leader in the energy transition. The scale of planned investments, from port infrastructure to supply chain development, mirrors the transformative impact of the oil and gas boom nearly 60 years ago. That said, competition in the global renewable energy market is intense. Recent announcements of public and private sector investments in offshore wind and supply chain development are encouraging. However, success will depend not only on public funding and private capital, but on swift and agile policy making, efficient planning, streamlined regulation, and policy certainty. I think most in the industry would agree that there is room for improvement. The Scottish Government's recent announcement of a new renewable energy hub in Aberdeen, combined with the UK Government's commitment to base GB Energy in the city, offers a promising framework for collaboration. By bringing key decision makers and private investors together, these initiatives could unlock significant growth. Ultimately, actions will matter more than words. Yet there seems to be genuine momentum and a strong sense of purpose among leaders to make this vision a reality. That, at least, is one reason to start 2025 with a degree of optimism. Graham Roy is Professor of Economics at the University of Glasgow's Adam Smith Business School. The article was read to you by Elizabeth. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 13th of January 2025, from the Voices section. The fate of this building is a warning. Now we need change. Article written by Mark Smith. You know the score. Building is neglected. Building deteriorates. Building goes on fire, probably. Building is pulled down. Building is gone for good. In Glasgow, it's been happening over and over again. But you know that too. Look at the rubble. And this week, it's been happening in Paisley. The question now is what we can do to make it stop. But let's go through some of the details of the Paisley case first, because I've seen the emails that have been flying around between the interested parties, and they reveal a couple of important points about listed buildings and how we protect them, or don't. On the face of it, the rules are pretty strong, and local councils have the power to enforce them. In reality, it looks like the rules aren't working, the system is being gamed, and we're going to have to change the law to stop it. The building in question this time round is the former Territorial Army Centre on Paisley's High Street. Designed by architect and son of Paisley, Thomas Abercrombie, it was built in 1896 and is, or was, a fine example of his work. It is, or was, also a recognisable part of the landscape for people who know Paisley, and we should do what we can to protect that because it matters. Do not destroy the places that made us. The issue with the TA building is very familiar, sadly. Occupied till the 90s, it lay empty for ages, and there were various ideas about what it could be used for, including student accommodation. Then in 2020 there was a fire, surely not, which left the building with no roof. And no roof means accelerated deterioration, which is exactly what happened. The possible way forward at this point seemed to be retaining the facade as part of a bigger development. Not ideal, but it's better than nothing. Scaffolding was put up around the remains, but in October last year, the owners, the JR Group, started removing the supports, meaning there was effectively nothing to protect what was left. This is when the law that's supposed to protect listed buildings should have kicked in, and Renfrewshire Council did issue stop notices and a listed building enforcement notice over October and November, ordering the owners to reinstate the scaffolding. But, according to the council, the owners didn't respond to the notices and didn't take any further action. And you don't need to be a structural engineer to know what that meant for the remains of the building. And here's where the really important bit kicks in, because a law will not be effective unless it has consequences and it's enforced, and what happened next fails that test. What the council could have done under the law is they could have issued an urgent works notice, which would have allowed the council to do the necessary work themselves and pursue the owners of the building for the costs. It's not ideal because the council would have to pay for it initially, but that's what the law is for, and it would at least save what is left of the building. However, we know no such notice was issued, and that instead, on December 19th, the council issued a dangerous building notice which gave the owners two options. 1. Put the scaffolding back up, or 2. Demolish the building completely. And to the surprise of no one, they've gone for number 2. So the truth is, it might be too late for the TA centre, although as of Sunday night, about 80% of it was still standing, which means the council could still act if it wanted to. Whatever happens, we should also look at the situation and work out how to stop it happening again. The JR Group themselves have not commented in detail, but a senior figure at the council said in one email that, given the owners purposely dismantled part of the support system, their intentions would seem clear. The MSP Paul Sweeney, who campaigns on these issues, has also pointed out the owners ignored all the enforcement notices but sprang into action when the council issued a dangerous building notice giving them exactly what they wanted in the first place. In Mr. Sweeney's view, the process has been cynically gamed. The JR Group's take is that the scaffolding itself had become dangerous. Although why not just replace the scaffolding or make it safe? Why take the supports down if it wasn't to hasten the building's demise? In the meantime, if builders and developers are indeed trying to game the system, we have to ensure the system is sufficiently robust to stop them. The clear danger of the TA Centre debacle is that others see bad behaviour being rewarded and try to get away with it too. The first conclusion, then, is that the current rules are not fit for purpose. The Council did issue enforcement notices, but the owners seem to have ignored them with impunity. I believe the Procurator Fiscal was notified of the breach of the notices, but what were the chances of enforcement really? It's clear from the Council communications I've seen that they were never likely to issue a notice allowing them to reinstate the scaffolding themselves because they were concerned about the costs. And this is worrying stuff. What's the point of an enforcement system if the costs mean councils are never going to use it? There are also questions to be asked over the issuing of the dangerous building notice allowing demolition. The Council appears to have relied on a structural report in November that concluded the building could be considered dangerous. But the report also said the danger was wholly as a result of the removal of the facade retention, and its recommendation wasn't demolition, it was that the retention system should be reinstated. But the Council then issued the dangerous building notice, effectively giving the JR Group permission to go ahead with demolition. So a couple of things need to happen. First, we need to look again at the evidence that's required for the issuing of dangerous building notices and the demolition of listed buildings. Demolition should be a last resort at the end of a robust process in which all options are considered and every action has been taken against the owners to make them meet their obligations. And it doesn't look to me like that standard was met in the case of the TA Centre. Secondly, no developer should be allowed to benefit from the neglect of a building or a deliberate action designed to hasten its decline. The concerns that councils have about costs are understandable, but if a company fails to respond to enforcement notices, there should be consequences, ideally fines, and ideally very large fines that are going to hurt. The Procurator Fiscal should also be looking at possible prosecution over the unauthorised removal of the retention system at the TA Centre. Anything else risks undermining the protection that the law is supposed to offer. The alternative, sticking with the system as it is really worrying, I must say. One thing you can be sure of is that developers who own buildings such as the TA Centre will be watching the case with interest. And what do we want them to see? That the protections we give to listed buildings are strong and if you break the rules you'll be punished? Or that the protections are weak and all you have to do is behave badly and you'll be rewarded? I know what it looks like and I know it has to change. That article was written by Mark Smith and read to you by Elizabeth.
From Herald, Scotland, 9th of January 2025, from the STEM section of the business section. Is the world going to hell in a handcart? It certainly seems that way. Article by Teddy Jameson. So, how's your 21st century going then? Here we are nearly a quarter of the way through it, and let's face it, for many of us it's been a grave disappointment. That certainly seems to be the case for Matthew Syed, presenter of Radio 4's new series 25 Years of the 21st Century, which started on Monday and has been stripped across the week. Syed's opening statement in the series recast the turn of the millennium as a time of optimism, at least in the West. The Cold War had been won. The world was democratising. History had supposedly ended, he recalled. It seemed stable, comprehensible. I'm not sure anyone quite feels like that today, he then admitted. Globalisation reversed, democracy went into retreat, fake news spread, populism rose, war returned to Europe, and the smartphone and social media transformed the fabric of life itself. Of certainty had given way to one of contradictions. We seemed to become less rational even as we became more technologically sophisticated. Syed and his guests, a gather-up of academics, scientists, authors and economists, then spent the week examining how the developments of the last 25 years have changed us, often not for the better. Technology and the speeding up of life was the underlying theme of the series. Tuesday's programme was about trust, or the misplacing of trust. in relation to social media and cryptocurrency. In the near future, author Rachel Botman suggested, there is no distance between the human and the machine. Wednesday's show asked, have we outsourced our memories to our phones? But Monday's show was the most disturbing. Kicking off with the ruptures caused by 9/11, it examined the changing face of warfare, most notably its increasing privatisation. Professor Anthony King singled out the role of Elon Musk's Starlink satellite technology in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Without it, Ukrainian forces may have fallen apart in the early days of the war. Then again, Musk also intervened to inhibit a Ukrainian attack on the Russian fleet in Sevastopol by turning off Starlink. That's a lot of control in the hands of one man, especially one who has shown himself to be willing to meddle in things he seems to know little about, as we in the UK have seen in recent days. Historian Margaret Macmillan admitted she was scared stiff about the project. And what worries me is that Elon Musk has just been invited in to dismantle the federal government. So who is going to be writing the contracts? She asked. He's got a huge amount of power, and it's not just the military, she added. Civilian communications more and more in the world depend on Starlink. I don't think we've realised quite how dependent we've become on one company and one man. Have we now arrived in the age of tech-bro-ocracy? Sharp gear change. On Tuesday, on Radio 4, Alistair Heather's Beyond Burns was a vibrant, vivid look at poetry in Scots that danced up the east coast from Dundee to Aberdeen to Orkney. Heather was an enthusiastic presenter and ended this programme calling out for greater use of Scots language in poetry and beyond. Speak up, he concluded. You've been telt. Tuesday also disappointingly saw the last episode ever of Shortcuts on Radio 4. I'll miss it. It was a wonderful format for new radio producers and unusual radio ideas, and for presenter Josie Long's hushed, almost ASMR voiceovers. The programme was often a little oasis of quiet exploration on the radio. Given that we're about to enter a 4-year period of noisy, cruel, performative stupidity, we could do with more of that. And Tuesday's programme also reminded us that even before words and music, radio is sound, as evidenced in the Shortwave Collective's contribution, Perhaps at Midnight, when all boundaries are lost. My antenna picks up very low frequency radio waves, one of the collective told us over the snack, crackle and pop. I'm not listening to commercial broadcasts or human transmissions. I'm listening to the Earth's natural static. It would be a shame if Radio 4 gave up this sense of adventure. 100 Ways of Listening on Sunday night on the station offered up some hope that this won't be so. In this playful, quirky half-hour programme, sound anthropologist Dr. Tim Rice examined the multiple and various ways in which we listen. Like Matthew Syed, Rice was alert to the possibly damaging influence of technology and the danger of AI, but he ended on a positive note. Each act of listening is a potential new point of connection, an enlargement of your consciousness. If anyone complains you're listening to the radio too much, you now know what to tell them. Listen out for The Folk Show, Radio 2, Wednesday, 9 p.m. A heads up for Dylan fans. Timothy Chalamet and James Mangold, respectively star and director of the new Dylan biopic A Complete Unknown, are joining Sean Keaveney to discuss all things Robert Zimmerman in the latest episode of The Folk Show. And that article was written by Teddy Jameson. From Herald, Scotland, 10th of January 2025. from the STEM section of the business section. Technology, Nia Casa P1 Pro Pet Grooming Kit and Vacuum. Article by Sean Dimmock. What is it? A pet trimming and grooming vacuum. Good points? The device is simple to use and boasts a 1 litre capacity collecting bin, which is large enough for multiple sessions before needing emptied. Its HEPA filter ensures effective containment of allergens, making it ideal for pet owners with sensitivities. The compact unit measures 29 by 13 by 21 centimetres and weighs 2 kilograms and includes a 1.3 metre hose and 2.5 metre cord to aid manoeuvrability. Included are 5 handy grooming tools which function well on most breeds of cats and dogs. These accessories provide a solution for every stage of the grooming process, from de-shedding, combing to clipping and any clean-up. There are 5 clipper guards ranging from 3mm to 24mm, allowing precise hair trimming tailored to different breeds and styles. The accessories are well designed and easy to interchange, enhancing user convenience. The vacuum is particularly effective, and its 9,000 PA strong suction power efficiently collects loose hair, preventing mess. With 3 suction level modes, users can adjust the power based on their pet's coat type and sensitivity. The low noise mode operates at 52 decibels, making it less intimidating for pets compared to traditional grooming tools. Bad points? The corded design can be limiting to those who like to carry out grooming tasks away from the main part of the home, such as in a garden or porch. Best for pet owners who value cleanliness and efficiency while maintaining their furry friend's grooming routine at home. Avoid if you are not comfortable trimming your pet, as all it would become is an expensive comb. Score 8 out of 10. Nia Casa P1 Pro Pet Grooming Kit and Vacuum, £139.99 from amazon.co.uk, and that review was written by Sean Dimmock. From Herald Scotland, 10th of January 2025, from the STEM section of the business section. Why are we always in the slow lane when it comes to infrastructure? Article by Andy McIver. As a party with no friends in a proportionally representative parliament, the Scottish Conservatives have never been particularly proximate to the levers of power during the 25 years of devolution. However, as the only party in the parliament which could claim to be from the traditional centre-right, it has often generated good ideas, especially when it comes to growing Scotland's lame economy. This was particularly true in the era before 2011, when the constitutional debate encompassed everyone and everything. I worked for the party in the early stages of devolution, and so it was with a wry smile that I read on the pages of the Herald on the first day of the year that in 2009 the Scottish Government had considered whether there should be an ultra-fast maglev train running on stilts along the M8 between Edinburgh and Glasgow. 2 years before that, in 2007, the very same idea had appeared in the Scottish Tory manifesto which I wrote, generated by the then Deputy Leader and Economy Lead for the party, Murdo Fraser. The idea at the time was to, in effect, create a twin city which would be in a better position to compete globally, attract investment and supercharge economic growth in the Central Belt for the benefit of the country as a whole. It is not at all unlike the thesis promoted recently by Donald Anderson, former leader of Edinburgh Council, and his former Glasgow opposite number, Stephen Purcell. Had it begun then, when the Scottish Government had discussed it, it would likely have been completed by now. Imagine the difference it might have made, in particular to the decaying Glasgow. Alas, though, the proposal never made it any further, having apparently been rejected immediately on the basis that there was no government budget from which the cost could have been met. Sadly, this is a familiar tale in devolved Scotland. There is shared blame. It is a long time since the Scottish Government could credibly claim to have outlined a genuinely ambitious vision on transport infrastructure, certainly using the definition of ambition that similar countries like Ireland or the Scandinavians would use. Its latest strategic plan, STPR2, was long on detail but short on high-level aspiration. Gone are the days of high-speed rail between Glasgow and Edinburgh, or indeed linking up the north, which is arguably even more significant given the gradual movement of Scotland's economy up and out. The focus on trunk roads remains the A9, critically important no doubt, but hardly the final piece of the puzzle. While Ireland announced the near completion of its road connectivity map with a new Cork-Limerick motorway, we continue to footer around, taking over a quarter of a century to dual a road which could be done in a matter of a few years with targeted investment. Meanwhile, the A96, the A82, the A75, the A77 and others, all mostly single carriageway, dangerous, high-carbon roads which impede the fast movement of people and goods, sit somewhere in a queue which never gets shorter. And that is just the mainland. Our islands and their waters are going to form much of the economic backbone of this country in a few decades' time. But getting to them and getting around them is devilish. While other rural nations oversee the near constant construction of bridges and tunnels, our public discourse revolves around replacing rusty ferries. However, I said shared blame earlier for a good reason. This new Scottish Government of John Swinney and Kate Forbes has put in place a sensible, foundational budget, but there is no denying that their government does not control the levers it needs to deliver a truly ambitious, generationally transformational programme of infrastructure. The primary issue is that major infrastructure build can no longer take place from within the public purse. The money the Scottish Government can find down the back of the sofa could not have paid for Maglev in 2009, and it also cannot pay for even one new road, tunnel, bridge or railway, let alone all of them. Instead, these must be paid for by private capital, and private capital must be borrowed. These peer countries borrow, build and pay back through tolling. We can't, because borrowing powers, and for that matter, powers over road and vehicle tax, are not remotely adequate. It is frankly baffling that supporters of independence fail to deploy this argument more regularly. Travelling the 133 miles between the two great cities of Scotland's north, Aberdeen and Inverness, takes nearly 3 hours by car, and not much less by train. Only a few miles shorter, as the crow flies, you can drive from Birmingham to Manchester in significantly less than 2 hours, or go by train in less than 90 minutes, and that is before HS2. The Aberdeen-Inverness corridor is critical to our energy future, and it is unthinkable that it would be in the state it is in if it was closer to London. This is a glaring opportunity for a struggling Scottish Labour, as much as it is for the SNP. If Anas Sarwar and his team are not in a position to extract a pledge from Westminster to create the mechanism to revolutionise Scotland's infrastructure, then I'm not entirely sure who is. This is, I am afraid, something of an indication of a lack of self-confidence in devolved Scotland. Devolution is 25 years old. We have spent the first half of it getting our feet under the desks, and the second half of it talking about whether or not we should be an independent country. Meanwhile, our competitors have their feet on the accelerator. Most countries in the world could open a map and wish they were Scotland geographically. Lots of land, lots of water, lots of wind. Potential, but not yet reality. Infrastructure is political gold. Building it creates growth. Delivering it creates jobs. Using it creates voters. And with only a little over a year to go before the Holyrood elections, there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for the party and for the leader who offers the people of Scotland something bigger and better and brighter than they have been offered before. There are plenty of other countries who seem pretty good at it. Why not us? And that article was by Andy McIver, who is founding director of Message Matters and co-host of the Holyrood Sources podcast.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 14th of January 2025, from the Voices section. The war on drugs is over. It's right to try something different. This article is by David Wilson. The opening yesterday of The Thistle in Glasgow, a safer drug consumption facility, SDCF, funded by the Scottish Government, is merely the latest piece of evidence that demonstrates the war on drugs really has finished. At The Thistle, people who inject can consume drugs which have been obtained elsewhere, in the presence of trained healthcare professionals in a clean and hygienic environment, so as to reduce the risk of overdose or catching infectious diseases. It's a recognition that the 400 to 500 or so people who were injecting drugs in the city centre, and let's be honest, we've all seen that happening, couldn't be policed into abstinence, and that attempts by the criminal justice system to manage them and the various problems they created had simply failed. Were you really expecting a different outcome? History is filled with examples to show that prohibition, in its many guises, doesn't work and often has negative, unintended consequences. Chief amongst these is that criminalization does nothing to tackle why people use drugs and the associated stigmatization that comes with having a criminal record makes it more difficult for the drug user to find work, support a family, or get help to overcome their addiction issues. Even as a prison governor, I used to find the concept of drug-free wings self-defeating, brimming with many and varied accidental outcomes. I wanted the whole prison to be drug-free, and so recognizing one wing or unit as such was actually an admission of failure. And what about the men that we housed there? They might themselves be clean, but far too many were regularly selling drugs to other prisoners housed in different units within the prison. Those drugs could be smuggled inside through various mechanisms, but all too often were brought in by a prison officer who, for one reason or another, had been coerced into behaving in this way because prohibition created a perverse but very lucrative market. Talking to friends who still work inside, I know that several serving prisoners are known to be making a very successful living selling drugs behind bars, and that some even sell beyond the prison's walls. The war on drugs was declared first in the USA, but even there, just under half of all states have now, for example, legalized recreational marijuana use, and 39 out of 50 states allow for medical marijuana to be prescribed. America has come a long way from just saying no, and of course, the Prohibition era between 1920 and 1933, which outlawed the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol, still provides the best evidence we have that this type of public policy merely drives the market underground. rather than reduces the demand for the product that's been prohibited. Of course, the Philippine drug war undertaken during the administration of President Rodrigo Duterte, who served between 2016 and 2022, did see a reduction in drug usage, but that came at a significant cost. Duterte admitted to having an official death squad, and thousands of people who were suspected of being drug dealers or addicts were extrajudicially killed, the government admitting to just over 6,000 such deaths. But human rights organizations have put that number much higher, with some calculating that as many as 30,000 Filipinos may have been murdered by the Philippine National Police. So the SDCF is to be welcomed as a recognition that other policies have failed. But what is it that we want to do, and how should we measure its success? That was a reference to the Safer Drug Consumption Facility, the Thistle. Let's think about answering that last question in two different ways. Success for the community of Glasgow, and secondly, success for those who inject drugs. This latter issue is no small matter, for we know that 1,172 people died in Scotland in 2024 from drug-related issues, a 12% increase from the numbers who died in 2023. Those numbers are a stark reminder that problematic drug use, which usually involves injecting, remains a significant public health challenge in Scotland. At the Thistle, users have access to clean equipment, advice about safer injecting techniques, and to staff who've expertise in responding to overdoses and who'll also be able to provide advice about other healthcare issues. The end goal here is surely to see a reduction in the numbers of people who are problematic drug users ending up dead. The SDCF is not about ending drug use, but more to do with promoting harm reduction and preventing fatal overdoses. In turn, all of this should benefit everyone else, from those who will no longer encounter discarded needles in our city centres, to reducing the numbers of acute hospital admissions in our NHS and lessening the time spent by our police and court system in handling issues which arise from injecting in public spaces. I'm really not seeing this issue through rose-tinted spectacles. I accept that there'll be problems and issues which are going to arise, and that there remain legitimate concerns that the existence of the Thistle might be seen to encourage rather than reduce problematic drug use. Nor am I pretending that using drugs is a social good. It isn't. However, we have to deal with all of this from the place where we currently stand, and so, for me, it's brave to admit that we've got to try something different. I've seen that sort of bravery before with the groundbreaking Glasgow violence reduction strategy, which was later expanded and extended to the whole of Scotland. That too was an admission that trying to fix a problem by using the police and the wider criminal justice system had failed, and that a different approach had to be implemented if violence, including murder, was going to be reduced. You'll know the figures yourself. Glasgow, the murder capital of Europe in 2006, reduced the numbers of murders in the city by 60% within a decade by dealing with the problem not as we'd always done, but by trying something else. The Thistle is our latest something else. Let's give it a chance. That article was by Professor David Wilson, who is a Scottish Emeritus Professor of Criminology, Herald columnist and TV presenter. A former prison governor, he's well known as a criminologist specialising in serial killers. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 14th of January 2025 from the business section. Data Vita in plans to create 200 new jobs within 5 years. This article is by Christy Dorsey. A Scottish company has said it expects to create up to 200 new jobs as it pursues a huge expansion in its current data centre capacity of 20 megawatts to 500 megawatts within the next 5 years. Work is already underway on an initial phase that will double capacity to 40 megawatts at the Chapel Hall facility of Data Vita, which also owns the Fortis Data Centre at Bells Hill. Danny Quinn, Managing Director of Data Vita, said the entire 5-year project will represent a total investment of approximately £500 million across the central belt of Scotland. News of the plans emerged as Data Vita reported its best ever financial performance. Total sales reached £13.3 million during the 12 months to the end of June, a 46% increase from £9.1 million previously. Gross margin improved by 62%, reaching £6.1 million, while earnings rose by 87% to £2.6 million. Mr. Quinn said the business, a division of Scottish commercial property company HFD, is focused on becoming Scotland's leading provider of AI-ready data centres. To achieve this, Data Vita is launching a range of services designed specifically to meet the technology's infrastructure demands. These include data centres capable of supporting workloads with up to 400 kilowatts per rack, a significant leap from traditional 4 kilowatt capacity. Earlier this year, Data Vita launched its national cloud service to address the growing demand for bespoke cloud solutions. It provides tailored services for workloads unsuitable for public cloud providers, prioritizing data sovereignty, cost transparency, and simplified pricing models. This has been a transformative year for Data Vita, Mr. Quinn said. Our exceptional financial performance, coupled with our strategic pivot towards AI-ready infrastructure and bespoke cloud solutions, positions us at the forefront of the industry. With the establishment of national cloud and ongoing investments in sustainability and infrastructure, reinforcing our leadership in environmentally responsible data center operations, we are excited to continue enabling innovation for our customers and contributing to Scotland's digital economy. That article was by Christy Dorsey. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 14th of January 2025, from the business section. Scottish economy goes into reverse as employment falls. This article is by Ian McConnell. Scotland's private sector economy went into reverse in December after an impressive 11-month period of growth, a key survey reveals. The decline in activity was the second sharpest among the 12 nations and regions of the UK, according to the latest growth tracker from Royal Bank of Scotland. Only 3 parts of the UK achieved growth last month: North East England, London and the East Midlands. North West England recorded the sharpest decline in activity. Employment in the Scottish private sector economy declined in December, the survey shows, after 22 consecutive months of growth. The fall in employment last month was driven by the manufacturing sector. However, the pace of decline in private sector employment in Scotland was less sharp than that in the UK as a whole, the survey shows. The Business Activity Index for Scotland, which measures the month-on-month change in combined manufacturing and services output, fell from 51.1 in November to 46.9 in December on a seasonally adjusted basis. This took it below the level of 50 deemed to separate expansion from contraction, and the December reading signalled the fastest drop in business activity in Scotland's private sector economy since October 2023. Judith Cruikshank, who chairs Royal Bank Scotland board, said, "Following an impressive 11-month growth period during which the average growth tracker business activity reading was 52.5, 2024 ended with a renewed decline in activity across Scotland's private sector. Companies are reporting a more cautious outlook for the new year, driven partly by a decrease for the third consecutive month in new business. Additionally, there has been a resurgence in job cuts as firms align their staffing levels with reduced business demands." She added, "Whether this is a temporary fluctuation, time will tell." Assessing the employment trends in Scotland in December, Royal Bank said, "The rate of decrease in employment was modest, primarily driven by a downturn in manufacturing. At the same time, job creation in service firms continued to cool. Contributing factors included reduced business activity, redundancies, and the non-replacement of voluntary leavers. That said, the rate of job reduction at the UK level exceeded that recorded in Scotland." That article was by Ian McConnell.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.